This episode is brought to you by Redwood Bureau, the new and terrifying podcast from my network, EerieCast. Redwood Bureau is a horror anthology series, kinda like SCP meets X-Files. Listen today on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts too. Thank you. Ever seen the movie Mirrors? About the down-on-his-luck dad who takes a night security job, only to go up against the most disturbingly brutal ghost imaginable. Yeah, if you haven't seen it, go watch it. And if you have, then you know just how scary security jobs might be. Yeah, the movie ain't real, but even in the real world, security pits everyday people against the unexpected, the unknown, and the dangerous. Today I've got some allegedly true and scary security stories for you to enjoy. Remember to send me your scary stories at darkstories.org or eriecast.com/forum so I can narrate them. You can also listen to all of our creepy podcasts at eriecast.com. Now, let's begin. Curious Dark Figure. From Anonymous. I'm a security officer in the Milwaukee area, and I've been at my current posting for a few months, working the night shifts. The business, I guess I could say, is a hotel for the sick and their families. It's newly built and less than a year old at the time of writing this. It has 2 floors with windows lining every wall. It's a very nice property to say the least. As the security officer at this business, I was tasked with monitoring cameras and every so often patrol the property to make sure everything is locked and no one is loitering on the property. There's only one security officer for each shift. When I first began the posting at the end of summer 2021, everything was going on as normal, and the nights were quiet. This continued for a few weeks, but around week 3, I began getting the sense that I was not alone, and I had the feeling of being watched. Perhaps I was just tired from long days of work, so I just chalked it up to me seeing things. So I continued my shifts as normal, until one day I started to see a dark figure out of the corner of my eye. When I looked up, the dark figure quickly moved behind one of the pillars. I stared for a while and even got up to take a look around the pillar, but nothing was there. I continued to monitor the cameras, reading a book, when I suddenly heard 2 taps on the window behind me. Not in quick succession, but about 2 to 3 seconds apart. They were not by any means light taps. It was more like a thud, like someone was trying to get my attention. I took out my flashlight as the lights were all off. I looked around, but I didn't find anything out of the ordinary. So I sat back down at my desk, going back to my business as normal. I know in hindsight, I should have investigated more. But at the time, I could not explain why it was happening, although the thought did linger in the back of my mind. When the time came, I began my rounds, and while walking down the southwest corridor of the building, I got the feeling of being watched again, and like any normal human being, I looked around. There wasn't anything in front of me, so I looked over my shoulder and my heart dropped. A dark figure slowly moved behind a doorway and disappeared. Was it just a shadow of a passing car? I thought to myself. My heart was definitely racing at this point, but I continued to walk down the hallway, occasionally looking over my shoulder. At the end of the hall are a set of windows before leading downstairs, and because it was dark outside, the window reflected like a mirror. About halfway down the hallway, I looked up at the window and see what looks to be a head sitting above my right shoulder. I immediately turned around, ready to confront someone, and again, no one was there. My heart was pounding, and I almost didn't want to continue my rounds, but I had to. It was my job. I know you're going to say I should have noped out of there, but I kept telling myself, this can't be real. I must be so tired I'm just seeing things. The whole time I felt like I was being watched, and the hair was standing up on my neck like they were going to pop out of the pores. While on the lower level, I had to use the restroom before continuing on. After I finished my business, I washed my hands, and while I turned the water off, I could have sworn I heard footsteps outside the door. I opened the door, and I looked in the lounge area and down the corridor, but nothing. If there was someone there, I would have seen them. Again, I thought I was just hearing and seeing things because I was getting tired. I walk not even 15 feet towards the northwest corridor, and the soap dispenser goes off twice in the bathroom, adjacent to the one I just used. Having just walked past it, I knew there was no one in there. I thought to myself, my shadow must have caused the motion sensor to go off. There is a light in the hall there, but again I shake my head and continue to walk on. My rounds include going outside, to which I felt a great relief when I walked out. I continued my normal route around the building. I was getting close to the garage, and I couldn't believe it. I looked up at one of the windows in the offices, and the outline of a dark figure was just standing there, looking down at me. I quickly shined my flashlight up at the window, but by then it was gone. My anxiety was through the roof now. I went inside and sat at the desk, refusing to move and do my rounds. Only until people started moving about when the sun came up did I gain back my composure somewhat. The staff of the building began to arrive later in the morning, dropping their belongings in the office. One of them came up and asked how the night went, to which I replied, it was all right, and I explained that it felt as if I was seeing things. The thing I didn't want to hear next was what she said. Yeah, we're thinking this place is haunted. There have been some weird happenings going on in the building, and I think it might be because the business across the street is trying to expand, and they found out they were digging up a burial ground. Maybe the disturbed spirits came over here. Just hearing those words made the sense of dread reign over me, because now I knew I was more than likely being stalked or watched by something. I began to explain to her about what I'd experienced overnight, and she had a very shocked and disturbed look on her face. After I left for the day, I spoke to the other security officers, and they too have experienced similar sightings, that feeling of being watched. However, each of them has said they haven't experienced anything other than that. One of the security officers that worked there almost refuses to come back. It's been 3 months now, and on occasion I'll get the feeling of being watched, hear footsteps along the hallway, and I'll see a dark figure. But nothing else has come of it. After a while, I began to lose that sense of being scared, and figured it must be a friendly spirit if there is one. But I still get that anxiety of being watched, with the hair rising on the back of my neck. I'm hoping this is just a curious ghost, and not something more. If something more sinister does happen, I'm not too sure I'm going to keep working here. I'm never going to be a security guard. From Daddy Maddie. So this story took place a few years back when I was 17. I was asked to patrol a local goat farmer's ranch at night for about 2 weeks. The farmer was a family friend and a neighbor to my Nana and Papa. We can call him John. My Nana and Papa own a farm about an hour outside of town in northern British Columbia, Canada. Being that Halloween just passed as of writing this, I was reminded of this story. Around the time of Halloween, goats go missing from farms often. Many farmers believe that witches steal them to sacrifice them on Halloween. I always thought they were just rumors, so I agreed to help patrol John's farm. The farm is close to 100 acres of land, so there was more than one of us helping out, a total of about 40 people. We all knew each other. That's the kind of thing you get in a small town. We were split into groups of 4 and had 2 ATVs between the 4 of the group. By now, I was starting to realize that John was not messing around. Most people from around that area owned a gun of some sort, and we were asked to have them with us while we did our rounds. Because I didn't live in that area, I didn't own a gun, so in my group, I was told to drive one of the quads. On the first night, we were given our instructions and areas to patrol. So, feeling all tough and cool, my group members and I got on our quad, with one person driving and one person scanning the area. So, 2 to each quad. Me and the guy with me, let's call him Mark, jumped on our machine and waited for the other group members to get settled into their machine. We'll call the other 2 Jack and Bill. The first 4 nights went normally, with the occasional twig snap and deer jump out of the darkness that gave us a small fright. But that was the last of the normal parts. The sun was rising, signaling the end of the 5th night. Mark, Jack, Bill, and I all began to drive back. While we were cutting through an area that we were not assigned to patrol, we saw a large brown lump on the ground. We drove up to it, and what we saw shocked me to my core. It was a half-skinned cow with weird runes burned into the half that still had skin. This was not one of the stereotypical cattle mutilations. Most of those have surgical precision cuts, but this one was very rough, with sloppy cuts. This made me think it was caused by a person. We radioed John, as well as the group who was supposed to be patrolling that area. Aside from the assumption that this was done by a person, we were all puzzled. We tried to find tracks leading towards or away, but we couldn't find any. Whoever had done this, they were good at covering their tracks. Anyway, we dealt with the cow, and the proper authorities were contacted. After this, I went home to go to bed, and to get ready for the next night. The following night, John put his nice cattle away, leaving the goats and not as nice cattle outside. Now, before I continue, John did not put all his animals away because he didn't have room. He was used to being able to let them out. We were reassigned new patrols that pushed us closer to the main area of the farm. I thought this was a very bad idea. Now, Watt or whoever was out there just gained about 5 acres of ground on us. The next few nights, nothing as extreme happened, but what did happen next was quite abnormal. Every time we drove by this one area, a perfectly white goat ran across the field in the distance. We all assumed this goat was just playing around, with somewhat of a personality, trying to keep up with us. This happened for 6 nights. I then decided to ask John about this white goat, but he told us that he doesn't own a white goat. Freaked out by this, we decided to chase that goat down when we saw it again. We felt safe because we were about as well armed as a Canadian can get. With 2 shotguns, we were ready to get that goat. Sure enough, we saw it running one night. But as we were chasing it down, Jack and Bill's quad started to overheat, so we had to stop. By then, the white goat was gone, and all the machines were back in working order, so we continued on with our duties. Throughout that night, stuff was coming out of nowhere and hitting our machines. We just brushed it off as sticks that were flicked up by the tires. But the next night was the night. At the start of the night, our group got together and prepped our gear and machines. We made sure both quads' cooling systems were in order, readying ourselves to chase that goat again if we saw it. I wish to this day we didn't decide to chase after that goat. Sure enough, just as the nights before, we saw it. We started to accelerate and chase the goat down into some bit of woods. We continued on through the trees. But then, after we turned a corner, it was just gone. At first, what we thought was a large stone began to move. This almost decaying-looking face spoke to us.
"Why are you chasing my friend?"
It said. I responded, "Sorry, miss, this is actually private property. It's a goat farm and cattle ranch."
"I didn't ask where I was. I asked why you were chasing my friend."
Jack spoke. Well, this being a goat farm and your friend being a goat, we thought it was one of John's goats that got loose. We were trying to bring it back to the group. Bill chimed in too. We're sorry. We didn't know it wasn't one of his. But this is private property. You can't be here. Mark, being an idiot, gestured towards his gun and quoted the old movie Home Alone. I'm gonna give you to the count of 10 to get your no-good, dirty keister off this land before I pump your guts full of lead, or something along the lines of that. The woman then yelled,
Watch your tone, boy.
But when she yelled, it sounded like there was 1,000 people also yelling behind her. The woman then began to run at us. Out of fear, I had said under my breath, Oh Lord Jesus. We didn't want to hurt the woman. She then stopped and took a few steps back, saying,
No, not that name. You can't say that name. He'll be angry.
It was at that moment we all looked at each other and yelled at the top of our lungs, Jesus. She then ran off into the night. Now, I've heard before that witches don't like when you say the name Jesus, but I had no clue it actually worked, or if this woman was just psychotic. If she was a witch, I've no clue what type of deal with the devil she'd made that made her so confident to attack people with guns, and I wonder who she was talking about that was going to be angry with her. But I hope she never sees another member of society again, and if she does, I hope it's someone that can give her some mental help. After that encounter, we all quit and never set foot on John's ranch again. I know I wasn't a security guard, but there is no other title I could call myself for this story. We were working security after all. I can tell you this, I will never be an actual security guard no matter what, where and who I'm guarding. Not after something like this. Overnight in the hotel. From ML. I did security for about 4 years, starting back when I was 19. I'm 27 now. Starting after my first year, I switched to working the night shifts in my area for extra cash. My regular account was a hotel right on Lake Champlain in the heart of Burlington, Vermont. The previous night guard became the overnight receptionist right after training me on the account. This will be relevant later in the story. My duties were to patrol through the entire hotel once every hour, from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., mostly just to make sure none of the large homeless population here would try squatting in a broom closet or such for the night. There were plenty of rooms in this hotel that would give you chills, like 2 of the 4 boiler rooms or the dark concrete corridor in the basement, where the security office happened to be. The worst was always the 5th floor, though. It didn't matter what time of night it was. If you were on that floor by yourself, your hairs would stand on the back of your neck and you'd always be looking over your shoulder. The layout of the hotel is like a lightning bolt. It has a staircase on both ends, one in the middle, and the elevators are just past the middle curve of the bolt. Relatively quickly, I noticed the unease of that floor. There was a light on the wall just outside the room next to the middle stairs that would periodically begin flickering at random times. It would happen one night and not the next, but it was a very regular occurrence. At first, I paid no mind to it. As I observed it more and more, though, it started to make me a little uneasy for some reason. Almost like the energy in the area was different when it happened. After a few months of this, it got to the point where every time I would get to that floor on patrol, I would stop at the staircase doors that had windows on them and peer down the hallway, almost like I was expecting something to be there. It sends chills down my spine just thinking of that feeling. But thankfully, nothing ever was there. On a few separate occasions, I was patrolling that floor when I heard the elevator ding from around that middle curve. This wasn't unusual, as guests would be in and out of their rooms all night, since the hotel is a stone's throw away from the downtown bar area of Burlington. However, on these occasions, The elevator doors would swing right open in front of me, just as I was walking past them, revealing them to be cold and empty. Now, if you know elevators, then you know this would only happen if somebody hit the up or down arrows on that floor. I guess somebody could have hit the button inside the elevator, but that wouldn't explain the timing or the fact that no other floor buttons were active. This was not the top floor, so there would have been more activated if somebody had just hit them all. After the third time this happened, I mentioned it to my previous coworker, the receptionist. She confirmed my suspicions and said she always felt the same way on that floor. In fact, it was half the reason she switched occupations. That and the better pay, of course. She went on to tell me that in the far past, there was a murder in the hotel. A man had brutally killed his girlfriend on the 5th floor. He wrapped her in the carpet and dragged her body to the elevator, then to his truck, where he drove to the middle of nowhere and disposed of her body. I never told her about the flickering light, but she told me it was in that specific room, right next to that flickering light on the 5th floor. I didn't believe her at first, but after a very, very long browse through the internet, we managed to find an old article about the murder. It was true. I only worked at that account for a couple more months after that, and never questioned my unease of that floor again. This may not be the scariest first-hand account, but I tell you what, I grew up in a haunted house, and I'm very curious of the paranormal. But I will not go back to that hotel ever again. Anonymous Security Guard Stories, a 4chan thread from August 1st, 2020. Hi X, I was wondering if any of you have been security guards. I myself do the odd job occasionally, and have some spooky stories to tell. If anyone would like to share their own, that would be great. Anonymous replies, I got a security contract to assist rangers in the deep forest. My shift was from 1800 to 0500. The pay was crap, but no interaction with normies, so it didn't bother me. I got to drive a company car, and essentially I got the whole forest to myself. Camping was forbidden at this forest. The job said to just report if you see any suspicious persons on site. Cameras are positioned at some parts of the forest, but would not be able to see any trespassers until notified by surveillance. I don't question it and drive in circles for a few hours, keeping an eye on things. There was no phone reception out there, at least for me. By 8 p.m. it was pouring rain, so visibility was essentially down to about 5 meters. It was the middle of summer, so it was heavy jungle-type rain that caused a lot of mist. At about 2 a.m., the mist was rolling in like crazy, and I couldn't see at all. At the time, I didn't really seem to care, so I kept driving and patrolling. Suddenly, I began to see shiny eyes dotting the sides of the road. They were catching the headlights of my car, and they looked really low to the ground. I pulled over to see what the heck it was, but when I do, it begins to move in the middle of the road. I realize then my car is further away than I thought, so I pull closer to get a better look. It doesn't move, just sits there in the middle of the road. I lock the doors just in case. I put on my high beams, and I slowly roll forward towards the eyes in the road. It looks like this small goblin-like creature. Then I realize it's actually a freaking huge owl, with its head cocked to one side and turned towards me. Nope, I drive around it and haul tail out of there. I see more pairs of eyes on the road as I drive past, watching. I can't help but cry as I go. I get to the entrance of the forest and calm myself down, and luckily the rest of the shift was okay. An anonymous user replies, Wait, so was it something supernatural or just a bunch of big weird owls? The OP of the story replies, They were supermassive owls. I didn't know they stood on the side of the road like that, and I didn't know they were so freaking big. I have never seen owls like that before. I also didn't know they walked distances like that. There were 10 to 15 of them in bunches. Weird as heck. Another anonymous user posts, I've had a lot of time in the security world, and my favorite gig was an armed patrol security company I used to work for. We'd primarily run security for Section 8 complexes. I was OIC of this in a major US city. The adrenaline rushes are addicting. So these Section 8 complexes get pretty ominous at night. The freedom of patrol is being able to respond to calls and really stretch out your legs during a shift. If one area was calm, you could head out to an area that needed you. Anyway, it was around 2 a.m. one night. I was patrolling in a complex comprised of multiple 3 to 4 story buildings. The place was so bad, we were often armed. I rolled around to the rear of the building. I noticed one of the boards to a dilapidated building is ajar. We would clear these buildings for vagrants and other illegal activities. I exited my patrol car to look around the area, and it's dead quiet. I figured I'd clear the building because it'd give me something to do. Once I get inside, I look around. The regular, once occupied dwellings have signs of a previous life. I always wondered who lived inside here. What decisions in their life led them here? What exactly happened that caused their building to be taken over by gangs and them being forcefully moved out? I'd always find the odd legal letter here and there, the odd children's drawing of their family or of the sun and flowers. I round the corner of one unit, and I find something interesting. I find a hole. I figure I can get through there pretty easy, and I'm curious on what's on the other side. I'm getting drywall all over myself, inhaling the good old asbestos. I'm now a dog on the hunt, basically. I find a series of holes, one leading to the next. This building is pretty big, mind you. It had to have had maybe 50 units inside. Honestly, I was having fun in this labyrinth. I was still going deeper into the abyss, constantly finding graffiti around. Sometimes it was a menu of services in the area. Other times it was just some kid screwing around. I figured I had to be getting closer to the end of it. There shouldn't be that many units left. I would always stop and read what I came across. Sometimes it was intel, but I would always think of myself as an urban archaeologist of sorts, absorbing everything I could find. I finally reached the end of my whole journey. The end has a bigger room attached to a smaller room to the side. Clearly, this is the sin room. I find a bunch of smashed phones in one corner and trash littered about, signs of people that were in this room not too long ago. Then I start to find a lot of bullet casings about the area. I made sure to document one. I see the last room I haven't looked into yet. I enter the last room, and that's when I see it. The danger zone. I take a pic when I realize where I'm at. Deep in a labyrinth that no one's supposed to know about, that no one knows I'm in, and my radio is out of signal range and I have no backup. There's a bunch of crap in front of me. There's blood on a mattress. When I go in for a closer look, I hear a series of footsteps in front of me. Immediately, I'm deep behind enemy lines, and I need to get out of here. I'm not a cop, and I don't give a crap what happened here. I just needed to leave. I book it back through the holes and I get back to my car. I light a cigarette and hit the road to calm my nerves. From the looks of it, I think this was an execution site for some gang. I don't know. I just didn't want to stick around and find out. After all, this place had murders every month at least. It was honestly the worst I've ever been to. It's now been demolished, but I find myself thinking about that urban labyrinth now and then, wondering what stories happen there. An anon by the name of Orion posted, I worked as a guard at an asylum. I was walking by a shower, and I hear someone inside mumbling something. I pound on the giant metal door. Then I hear a voice. Hey man, gotta get out. I had the shower key, and I had the door open within a few seconds. But when I opened it, there was no one inside. I stepped in to search the shower. The lights were off, so I had nothing but the dim light from outside the shower and my flashlight. Then I heard the voice of someone mumbling next to me. before I could make out what they were saying. I thought, nope. I step out and slam the giant steel door shut. But then, I hear the water inside turn on. It couldn't have been the door slamming that caused it. To turn the shower on, you have to mash a button and hold it for a few seconds. So I just walked away. Crap like that was so common at one point, I barely reacted to it.